There are so many things that the right mouse button can do inside of Marvelous Design that I've decided to dedicate the whole section of this tutorial just to it, instead of splitting everything into right click in the UI, right click into lines, and so on. So I'll begin with the most simple, with the most basic technique that involves right mouse, which is moving things around. It doesn't matter whether it's a point, a segment, or the whole garment. So the way it works is that if we select a point, for example, and we move it, and as we drag, if we right click, a new window appears where we can change the length, we can change the degrees of the axis, and so on. The cool thing about it is that the program recognizes and remembers the vector by which we were moving things, and it preserves it. So when we change the distance, the vector stays the same, and it works, like I said, on everything. Doesn't matter if it's a point or a line, as well as the whole garment. If we wanted to be very precise about arranging things, we can always put some special numbers that we like. Another cool thing about the right mouse button is we can create as many segments as we want by copying and pasting the segments. So if I select this elastic piece, and if I press Ctrl C on the keyboard, and then I press Ctrl V to paste it, if I click right mouse button right now, a new dialog appears that lets me select the interval between the segments, as well as the amount of the segments themselves. So I can put as many as I want. So it's a really nice and quick way to duplicate something, some patterns or some repetitive garments. It also works on the lines, on the internal lines, and there's even more features within. So if I select this line, if I Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and if I move it, and then as I move this line, if I right click, as you can see, we have the same window with all the options, but underneath there's another position section, which is quite useful for pattern creation. And the cool thing about it is that we can change things like up and down direction and all those cool things, as well as the standard number of shapes. And the last thing is instancing. If we click on this elastic again and then right click and use this option, which allows us to create an instance of a garment. If we click here, and then if I right click as I move this, I get the same window as before with the interval and number of shapes. But the cool thing about it is that those are all instances. So if I change something on one garment, everything changes with it. Another common practice using the right mouse button is to change the length of the segments. The first method is to select a point, move it somewhere, and as we move it, click right mouse button, and we get this option again when we can change the distance, we can change the axis. It's a powerful feature for sure, but I would say it's a kind of old school way of changing the length of things, because there's another thing that the right mouse button lets us do, which is change the length of the lines without moving any points. And this works really well in combination with checking the length of the seams. So if we press this this icon and we go somewhere where we have some lines in red, and let's use this case as an example. This line and this lines, they're connected, they're sewn together, but they're in red, meaning that they're different size. And if we look at the numbers, we can clearly see that there is quite a bit of a difference. It's more than 30 millimeters. So if I want to match them, if I want to make the length of the lines the same, instead of moving the points like I showed before and then clicking, right-clicking and then changing the distance and calculating what is the difference between this line and then basically subtracting the amount and put it in here, what we can do instead is we can right-click on the segment and use this option called change length. And as you can see, there's an arrow appearing now, which indicates from where the change is going to happen. And we can choose whether we want it to go from this direction or from the opposite direction, or if we want the change to happen in the center. Basically, the point is going to be here, and then both sides are going to be modified. So in this case, I'm going to put the number that I want, which is this line, 657.7, and I want it to change in this way. I want this piece to be subtracted, not the bottom. If I wanted the bottom to be smaller or shorter, I would reverse the setting, but this one, it works perfectly here. And the really cool thing about this method, the change length option, compared to the clicking and dragging the point and then right clicking to change the distance, is that the change happens along the curvature of the line. So even if you have something extremely wavy, this method will work really well there as well. So if I click, as you can see, now we have perfectly matching lines. Changing the length using the right mouse button also works on the seams. So if we choose the free sewing, and that's the only sewing mode where the right mouse button works, if we click it and then we click somewhere we want the seam to start, as we go, if we right click, we get a new window, which is the same window that happens pretty much every time we press the right mouse button. And in here we can change the length of the seam itself. And when we're happy, click OK, and then choose it somewhere else to sew.
If you enjoy this content or find it useful, please consider supporting me by buying me a cup of coffee via the link in the description.
Yet another way to change the size of something, but it's a bit clunky, is to use the transform point segment feature. If we select something, if we, let's say, select those two segments, and we wanted to modify the size, if we, well, scale them, and as we scale, if we right click again, we get to choose a whole bunch of things. So we can choose the percentage of the width, of the height, whether they are linked or unlinked, so we can change things individually. And we can change instead of changing the percentage of the scaling, we can change the dimensions, we can change the width of the lines or the height of the lines. So again, it's another hidden thing. It's not as precise as all the other features, because it's a bit of a guess game, I would say. Only if you want to change something in groups, and for some reason you want it to be extra precise in percentage, that's when this option works well. The relatively new feature that involves right-clicking is the symmetrical creation, which is really useful. If we want to create a shape and we want the shape to be symmetrical, instead of creating one side and then copy and pasting the symmetrical side, what we can do is we can click, and as we move the line, if we right click, not only do we get to choose the length of the line, which is quite handy, we can also click the tick, this little box saying that the symmetrical creation is going to start working now, and we can change the axis. We can change whether it's X, Y, Z or local, and I think this is quite self-explanatory. So if we press OK and we continue working, you can see that on the other side the symmetrical line appears, and it's a very useful way of doing things that require symmetry. And the shape stays symmetrical, so if we modify one side, the other is going to change as well. Another implication of the right click involves some of the tools that we have inside of Marvelous Designer. To begin, we'll select the smooth curve feature, and this thing can work the same way as previously, when we click on the point, and as we drag it, as we move it, we can right click, and then we get to choose, well, how we want this curvature to behave. We can change individually the size, and the cool thing about this option, this right click window option, is that we can change the direction of the curvature itself. We can go either inwards or outwards. The second tool to talk about is darts creating. Darts are very useful if there is some excess of fabric that we want to remove without modifying the design of the garments. It's especially useful when we're working on female characters, and in the breast area sometimes there's just too much pulling happening, or there's excessive fabric, especially in this area, especially in the armpits and the breasts themselves. So in those cases we would use darts. We would create a cut somewhere in here, then we just remove the excessive fabric and sew it together. And this is not the Marvelous Designer practice, this is the real life practice, meaning that tailors use it all the time when they want to fit clothing properly to the body. And darts are located in here inside of internal shapes, but I'm going to talk about the other kind of darts that involve right clicking. And if I have a point somewhere and I want this point to be the beginning of a dart, all I need to do is click on that point, and then there's this option, add dart, and in here we can change the width, we can change the length of the dart. And the good thing about it is that those lines are immediately sewn together. So if we were to simulate this, the changes will apply immediately. And speaking of points, if we want to split a segment, if we want to split a line somewhere, there are two ways of doing that. One way would be to choose the segment point tool and then add a point somewhere. But if we wanted to split a segment in half, or if we wanted to add extra points and we want them to be separated by a specific amount and we want them to be evenly spread out, we can either select this segment point tool and then move somewhere on the segment and then right click, and we get this this option. But we can do the same thing without even going in here, without even selecting the tool itself. All we need to do is simply right click on a segment and then press split, and it gives us the same toolbox where we can change the amount of points, we can change the length, we can change the position, and all other good things that are very helpful and quite useful. And the last thing to talk about the right click is how it can be used inside of the UI. If we click somewhere where there are no tools, if we can click on this panel, for example, or if we click somewhere in here, somewhere in here, we can tick or untick those two options. And this is basically ticking and unticking the windows that we have open inside of Marvelous Designer. So if you want to work on the model itself, if you are in the final stages when you want to move things around on the folds, when the garments are complete and you're happy with the results, but you want the model itself to look more visually appealing, we can simply right click and then untick 2D view, and we get to work only in the 3D view. And the same works in here. If you're doing some kind of intricate pattern, or if you're just working on the garments and you don't really require any 3D view at this point, that's one way to do that. The second thing we can do is we can select things using the UI and right click. So if I choose this piece, and if I go into any of these options, if I, for example, want to use layer, if I right click, there's an option select all with the same property, and this works on every single modifications, every single option that we have in here. So if, for example, if I right click on the layer and I click select all with the same property, everything that has layer 2 is now selected. If I wanted to select something that has, let's say, a custom shrinkage, and we wanted to select the weft as the indicator, if I right click here and press select all with the same property, everything that has the same weft percentage is selected, and it can be used, like I said, basically everywhere. But if you have any pressure, if you have thickness, custom thickness, particle distance, all of those things, this can be easily selected using the UI. The thing about this kind of selection, though, is that it doesn't select anything that is symmetrical in the 2D view, meaning that if I was to select, let's say, everything that has particle distance 14, and I want it to be selected, like physically selected, so I can move them out of the way for some reason, I can't really do that using this. This kind of selection allows me to select everything if I want to change something. For example, if I wanted to, those pieces that have particle distance set to 14, if I want to change the layer of those garments, that's a really useful and effective way of selecting. We can also very easily and quite quickly add some garments to our scene without going to the file and add garment and so on. If we working inside of library, when we have everything set up, that the scene has all the garments and all the models that we're working with, if we want to add something here, we can do it quickly by right clicking and then pressing add to workspace. And the last thing to talk about is perhaps the funniest feature inside of Marvelous Designer. And it's not like there are funny features in here, but I just love this one. If we do anything that involves any numbers, so for example, if I select this garment and I move it and then I right click it, every time I get this kind of box where there is a number that I can change. If I right click that, if I did original right click and then I right click in here, there's an option just to bring up a calculator, which is both useful and funny at the same time. It's useful if you're working on something extremely precise and you want to change something in that sense, and then you need to figure out the difference between this garment and the difference between other garments, and you wanted to change it into some different measurements and all of that. Calculator can definitely be a very useful tool. I just absolutely love how well hidden this feature is. It's not like you need to go somewhere in here and find it, and you cannot find it in here. I think, as far as I know, you cannot find calculator anywhere in here. You need to right click and then right click any number, and that's how we get to use the calculator.